This conference will now be recorded.
There we go. Okay, so what gratitude intervention did you try, and did it work?
I was really working on being grateful.
So, starting from now, would you be capable of I'm not even going to put energy into it until he's ready.
To like remind myself to do each time. You know, there wasn't any specific time of day that I was going to try to do it.
Okay, so not a specific time of day, but just sort of in the moment. But it was hard. Did you come up with any primers or any things to like help like remind you?
I didn't, and I think that's kind of
what you want to do going forward. Okay.
I mean, it definitely worked through it because I walked down the lake on Saturday, and I looked at that one, and I was like excited and happy, and I was like, whoa, take a second and enjoy this and be grateful for the moment. And so it really works then, and it made me even more happy, and it made my happiness last longer. Like what we talked about.
Okay, so having that great moment, and then you're grateful for it, and then that really just boosted it and made it last longer, right? And then probably you're also able to remember it later on in the day. Yeah.
And I can think about it now because on Saturday.
So you're just multiplying that the positive emotions. That's great. That's great. Anybody else? Thank you.
So I had like a little prayer before my meal at dinner.
Yeah.
And then also yesterday I tried doing gratitude and fun time with my partner.
Yeah.
So we were just kind of like running around and talking about the things that we were grateful for.
Oh, that's great. So you tried the gratitude ping pong with a clementine, which is awesome.
Yeah. So fun.
Yeah, that's really great. I wouldn't even think of that. I'm always searching when I'm going to something like, oh, I need to buy some balls or I need to buy something, but that might like double as. Yeah, right. Okay, great. And then so you said you also like included it in, like, so your primer might be, or you're something you already have a habit for might be prayer, and then you're including it in that.
Right.
Right. Okay, great. So we're just sharing what gratitude intervention that we did last week and what worked and what didn't work. And anyone from online want to talk or want to chat something that I can share, just let me know. Okay, so all right, so the next question I'm going to ask is which of the other 12 interventions did you try and were any successful? So the other interventions, one of them was gratitude, but the other one would be, I think, goal setting, forgiveness. It's on the front of you. Let's see.
I tried the mind body.
The mind, okay.
I know pretty much already incorporate the majority of them into my daily life, but I felt like I could focus a little bit more on the mind body.
The mind body, okay.
So in addition to me, but in addition to me exercising in the morning, my building offered a free yoga class. So I took advantage of that, and they actually have it every week, which is pretty cool. So I think I'll start going there because it helps me to work on my meditation, just relaxing and releasing some anxiety and what you stress.
Okay, great. So you did your exercise every day, and then you incorporated a new yoga class, and that helped with relaxing and letting go of stress. Okay. Yeah, namaste. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Anybody else try any of the other interventions? Savoring. It sounds like you did a bit of some savoring with your walk too. Relationships, gratitude, goals, coping, kindness, flow, optimism, spirituality, mind, body, forgiveness, and non-comparison. Anybody find another intervention that specifically worked for them? Okay, and let me check with online and see if anybody. Okay, so I'm getting meditation. Okay, and then so Alyssa's saying she and her partner shared 3 things they were grateful for before they went to bed. That's great. That also sets your mind in the right way to think as you're going to sleep. And she tried some mindfulness, which we're going to do next week too. Okay, so then she's also sharing that she bought a Nintendo Switch, but she realized that was not self-care, it was more distracting. Right? And she's like, yeah, there's some things I do and I think, oh, this is my reward, but it's really more of a distraction than a self-care thing. So that's super insightful. Okay, thank you guys for sharing. Okay, so today we're going to talk about growth mindset. How many of you have heard of it? 1, 2, okay. So it's very popular, and there's some books about it, and you know, there's some TED Talks and things, again, you can watch. But we're going to talk about what mindset is, and then we're going to talk about how to change our mindset and make it more growth oriented in different areas. And we're going to do that through praise and through questions, right? Okay, and so Sarah's sharing that they have a career counseling class and she's learned about it. So let me ask you a question. Can you become smarter? Yeah? Yeah, everybody's shaking their head. Okay, yes. I get an emphatic yes online. Okay, great. So what do you believe? Your intelligence is something very basic. You can't change. You can learn new things, but you really can't change how intelligent you are. You're a certain kind of person. There's not much you can do about that. Okay, this would be fixed mindset. And no matter how much intelligence you have, you can always change it quite a bit. You can always substantially change how intelligent you are. No matter what kind of person are you can always change substantially. And so these would be statements that reflect a growth mindset. And so Carol Dweck is the main author and researcher behind mindset, and here's her book. And this has really been applied to school children and how they learn. But mindset is a set of beliefs or a way of thinking that determines one's behavior, outlook, and mental attitude. And so just to refresh you, a belief is a thought you've repeated often, and it's something you've convinced yourself is true, but may not be true. And so one of the things that we deal with in positive psychology is we have a lot of beliefs about ourselves, about others, that tend not to be true, and they're not helpful, right? So this fixed mindset, there's nothing wrong or bad about it. It's just simply not helpful to us and to others. Okay, so a fixed mindset is like a rock. It's rigid. You believe you're talented or you're not. And you kind of believe you're born with what you're born with, right? And well, there's definitely heredity, you know, is involved. And I'm not dismissing that. But growth is more like Play-Doh. And we're malleable. And we can be curious. And then we believe nurture has an impact. So these are the difference between the two. So what I want to ask you to do right now is to think of a big challenge you've had in the last few weeks. Think about what was the problem. Think about what was your belief about the problem. And was your belief going towards a fixed mindset or a growth mindset? So I want you to think about that and then share with a partner. For those of you online, you can just type your challenge and whether it was growth or fixed, and tell us a little bit about it in the chat.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so want to ask how that was. How was it when you thought about a problem? I've been chatting with people online, and I'll just kind of share the themes from online. So, you know, what I'm seeing online is there's this thought of like I have to be perfect and everything has to be right, and you know, right now in this moment, versus you know, I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to grow and I'm going to learn, you know, this product that I'm putting out, or maybe this internship I'm going for. One of the things I learned from growth mindset was when I'm grading students to not think of it as like pass fail, but think of it as not yet. Like to really have that belief that they're still going to get there rather than like you didn't get this assignment, but to think like not yet, but really to have a confidence that they will get there if they keep practicing, which is a completely different mindset than I've had, you know, my whole life grading and with students. So what did you guys have? What would anybody want to share? You don't have to.
So
Yeah,
mine
Kevin.
will relate to this. So mine was my first statistics case study.
Oh,
Let's do last week.
first statistics case study.
Yeah, so it was a lot of anxiety about it.
Tons of
The
anxiety.
rest of the class was more freaked out about it than I was, and so I started picking up on all that. It was so difficult, and I really had to like calm myself down. And I had put all my notes out on the table and the homework assignments I had done thus far, and started working through the case study very calmly. And I knew I could. I didn't think this was going to be hard. I wasn't going to be able to do it, but I knew I could. I knew I had the information to do it. So, you know, whenever I go through those steps in the case study, I'm like, okay, I know how to do that. We did that in homework 3 or whatever. Let me see what we did. And I was able to smoothly get through it and actually got a really good grade on my first case study.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so Kevin was saying that he was keeping himself really calm, and that he was thinking of like, I have all the resources here, and that's really a self-talk mechanism we use to build self-efficacy. And it's this: I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, and just that continual self-talk can make the difference. Because imagine if you're sitting there trying to do your case study and you're thinking, I'm not going to get this, I don't understand this, I'm not going to get this, versus if I sit here and I sit with it long enough and I go through my materials, I will. Like it can send you in a completely different way. So, you know, I think underlying that was this belief in your ability to grow, right? Or this belief that you can get it, right? And that you will. That's great. That's a great example. I know first case study in IO is, it is. Anybody else? Yeah.
I found that with my problem, I had kind of a halfway in between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. So I had this idea, it's a communication problem with me and someone else, and I had this idea that if we work on it, we can figure out a better way to communicate, which I felt like was kind of a growth mindset. But then I also had this kind of externalizing blame game.
Yeah.
Where I was like, oh, it's the other person's fault more than mine, and that person needs to be more of the change than I do, which I felt like was more of a fixed mindset.
Okay, great. So Meg's saying that around communication and your the growth mindset is like we can work on our communication, we can get better. Like we're just not understanding each other, right? We need to come to understanding. And the fixed mindset is like something's wrong with you and you need to change, right? So that we can communicate better. I mean, I just think that's like a thread throughout life, right? I mean, and I find when I have those difficulties and you start going down that path versus like, no, I'm like, I genuinely be curious and I genuinely want to know what they're trying to say, can really flip that. That's a great example. Okay. Somebody online said, I'm in that class, referring to stats class. Okay. Yeah, you know what? And just so you know, for the IO people, that your anxiety is going to go down. After that first case study, you realize you can do it, and it's just a matter of doing it now. Like the worst is over. It's not that bad, I promise. You'll look back. You guys have got so much support. You'll feel it as you're, go through and get your, I think everybody's so nervous about that first case study. Okay, so I have a cartoon here, Calvin and Hobbes, and just let you guys read it. And so this is really exemplifying. Oh, I can't see the screen. Okay, it says it's sharing it. Let me try again. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, she saw it. All right, can you guys see me too? Maybe when I paused recording for the break that it did that. Okay, so this is a classic example of fixed mindset. This belief that you don't have to put in any work in order to be smart or to get something. And once I learned this, it's so interesting when people ask me stuff. I'm always like, if you work hard, if you keep practicing, yes, you can do this. Like, you want to do this, yes, it's just to keep practicing. So practice is the big thing that I talk about. And all of the experts in the field, you look at Michael Jordan, you look at really famous musicians, it's tens of thousands of hours of practice. You know, they just weren't suddenly that way. It was something they doggedly pursued. Okay, so here's a chart to help us understand how, you know, what does failure mean? Fixed mindset is really this internal, I'm a failure, and growth mindset is, I just need to work harder. I'm not there yet. And when I think about some like big failures in my life, at the time, it seemed like it was me and I was a failure. And you know what? I simply needed to do that thing one more time, sit in that class one more time, take those exams one more time. And then I did well, but it just wasn't going to happen the first time around with not a lot of effort from me. What does success mean? It's kind of like, I'm smart, I'm done with that, move on. You know, just not going to pay attention to that versus what else should I do? How else should I keep growing? And effort is sort of classified as, if this is hard, then I'm not good enough and I need to quit. And versus effort makes me smarter or more talented, right? That effort's really going to pay off. And fixed mindset is you know, I might appear dumb, right? I always think about this with dancing lessons. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that because I'm going to look dumb when I start, right? Before you get good, right? But you have to. But it's an opportunity to learn and grow and develop. Okay, and then when do you feel smart? For fixed mindset, it's like when I hit perfect right away. And for growth mindset, it's when you learn something new, right? You're always challenging yourself. And attitudes to others, you see others as a threat. They're going to judge you in fixed mindset. People are going to see me in a bad way versus seeing someone as a resource. And where you guys are in your career, you can imagine when you go to your internship, your practicum, if you see somebody as a resource to help you, that's going to be completely different. And I read internship journals every week. I'm on Sonets right now. And you know, I constantly see students saying that they're afraid of the way they're going to be perceived rather than reaching out and asking questions and trying to learn, right? They don't want to be, it's their first time out. They don't want to be viewed as not knowing. Well, everyone knows you're an intern and you don't know. So just sort of get over that and try to learn. So this can be really critical on your practicum and your internship. Okay. So I'm going to tell you about a few studies. Oops, let me go back. Sorry. Basically, there's a lot of research in this area, and I just want to point out how important growth mindset is. So they did a study with students in Hong Kong, and they tested them on whether they were growth mindset or fixed mindset, and then they offered them, they tested them on their English, you know, English is a second language, and I offered them a remedial class. Those with a growth mindset took the class, got better in English, and got better grades. Those with the fixed mindset passed on the opportunity, right? The fear of it was too much to do, and then did worse, right? So part of that growth mindset is seeing those opportunities in front of you. So the ideal mate, people who are growth mindset will say, yeah, in my ideal mate, I'm looking for somebody who's going to round me out, somebody who's going to show me my flaws and help me be a better person. And people with a fixed mindset will say, my ideal mate is going to put me on a pedestal and sort of worship me and say that I'm perfect and say that everything's great. And that's what I'm looking for, right? So you can see like different outcomes in relationships. Another one, social comparison on tests, is that, and they literally, oh no, that's a different one. And the social comparison on test is when people, in an experiment, they said you failed the test. They gave them a test, and then they said you failed. They tested them on growth mindset, and they said, do you want to see somebody who did better or somebody who did worse than you on the test? People with a growth mindset said, I want to see somebody who did better. I want to learn. I want to grow. People with a fixed mindset said, I want to see somebody who did worse. I need to puff up my ego, right? I need to like do some ego soothing. And then the Spiced Up Math class, I think this is really important for anybody who's going to go into teaching in any way. Telling people in a math class that mathematicians were geniuses, and they were so great and wonderful, automatically induces a fixed mindset. Saying that the mathematician was an ordinary person who worked really, really hard and then became a great mathematician will induce growth mindset. So like talk about stats class, right? We could, induce some growth mindset and stats, because that's when people are afraid. Okay, so this next study, they hooked people up to the scanners and they were giving them questions, and they were getting the questions right and wrong. And as they were getting the question wrong, the different areas in the brain lit up, right? And so basically for people with a fixed mindset, their brain just started shutting down when they were getting things wrong. Again, this ego defense mechanism, right? Versus people with a growth mindset stayed engaged, therefore were learning, and when they asked them again, they had actually learned and gotten better, right? So I think one of the things that's really important to think about in this area is that one thing I really love is we're all recovering judges. We're all recovering judges. So like if you're starting to feel bad that you've got a fixed mindset about something, remember, we're all recovering judges. But the other thing is, I think that's really important is to look at the different areas in your life. And there are some areas where I am very growth mindset. Is there a journal article to read? Yeah, I'm all about it. Is it some technology I need to learn? Well, all of a sudden here comes fixed mindset. I'm terrible at technology, blah, blah, blah. And I've shared with this class before, when I analyzed where I really had some fixed mindset, it was where I was putting in the least amount of effort. So what was I doing to help my technology skills? Absolutely nothing. So if I wanted to learn something, in the IO or the positive psych world, I'm on YouTube, I'm reading articles, I'm really getting into it. And when it comes to technology, I was just turning off and moving away. And so when I learned that, I just set out a little training program for myself with all these videos I was going to watch so I could get better at something. And then what happened? My confidence went up, and I was like, yeah, anytime I incur this problem, I'm just going to, I'm going to do this thing that helps me feel better. So thinking about the different areas in your life that you have fixed mindset and growth mindset. Okay, so one way that we can induce growth mindset in others is to use process praise. And one way to induce fixed mindset is to use person praise. And maybe there's a lot of popular articles out right now about kids and praise. And when you're saying you're so smart, it's actually doing some harm. So this is kind of touching on that. So when you do person praise, you're talking about who the person is. Again, you're so smart. When you do process praise, you're talking about what they're doing. You studied really hard for that test. I noticed you studied every night, or you didn't go to the movies. You really focused and gave up what you normally love to do in order to do well on this test. And person praise really focuses on character traits, talents, intelligence, again, these fixed properties. And process praise focuses on practice, persistence, and strategy. So another thing I like to say is you did not give up. You really kept going. I noticed that when that was really hard, you started looking at other ways to do that. Okay, so there's some popular articles out there. What do you think is the problem with person praise? Why is it not the best? Yeah, Matt.
I was reading an interesting article about the negatives of this, and one of the aspects that they talked about that I didn't really think about because I was really focused on how it's impacting the individual who's being praised.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to read this article, and it's talking about a sibling.
Mm-hmm.
And what it was saying is that if you are praising one kid for being really smart, the other kids in the house hear that
Mm-hmm.
and have this really negative aspect of themselves.
So they're thinking they're the opposite.
Yeah, and maybe the other sibling gets a good grade on a math test and they didn't get a good grade on their math test, or even not even bad grades, but just not
as good. So then this other sibling is like spiraling down while this praise is happening with the other siblings.
Okay. Yeah, so this is actually something I've never thought about or talked about, but I think it's very relevant. And what you're saying is this person praise can induce social comparison. And so Meg was talking about with siblings, and I'm just repeating everything so they can hear it online, that when you're praising one sibling, the other can go in a negative spiral, and they can think they're the opposite. Right. So social comparison. We haven't even talked about that yet, but that's so true. Well, so one of the other issues is if I say you're so smart and then now you fail a test, what do you think? You're dumb. And you have no strategy for what to do. Right? So, but if I've been saying, if I've been telling you you're doing such a good job because you're working so hard and you're studying or whatever the technique is, then when you don't do well, what do you know to do? More of the hard work, right? So that's another thing is that to the actual kids that are receiving it, when they first run into problems, then they think they're not smart. And this I just thought about this. This happens at Harvard. Mm-hmm. So imagine, so Harvard's taking the smartest of the smart, across the nation, right? So they all come to Harvard, and they have a problem with depression that first year. And you know why? So much pressure. Well, so much pressure, but you've been the best, you've been the top, and now you're in the bottom. You're in the bottom half, you're in the bottom quarter percentile, right? So you've gone from, being on top to being at the bottom, or not being at the top anymore, right? So also very interestingly, their most popular class is positive psychology. So people flock to it. Okay, so an easy way to think about this is, and I really struggle. I mean, I've worked really hard for a couple years now, because when I learned this, I was saying, you're so smart. Oh, yeah, and now I say, oh, you worked really hard. So when you're saying you're so, it's probably going to be followed by person praise, and you did. So what is the action that they're doing? Okay. And so, that's right. I also have this picture. So, sort of illustrating person praise is like junk food, and, processed praise or your fruits and vegetables. Okay. And so right now we're going to do an activity. And I want you to reflect on the positive introduction that you heard from your partner last week. Or maybe for those of you online, one that you saw last week. So remember when you introduced yourself as like that, from that really high moment in your life, sort of reflecting on that. And then write down 3 statements that reflect the process praise you could say to them. Right? So reflecting on the story, and then like what process praise could you give them? And I'm going to give you a few minutes for that.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so what was that like, thinking about some process praise to give that person? Was it hard? Was it easy? Hard.
You don't really realize that you're giving a lot of personal praise. So actually, more action instead of you're so genuine kind of person. You thought it was very helpful way to be a blessing to that moment. Still person.
No, I think you were being very helpful. Remember, if it's focused on the action they're doing versus some innate trait, then yeah, I think it's process. Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to give you a little practice, and we're going to practice some more in just a minute. But in the academic world, this is called learning orientation. So you might, if you hear growth mindset, learning orientation, they're the same thing. And so it's sort of been broken down. It's now been broken down into 4, but I really like this 3 model approach, where Learning orientation is mastering the material for learning's sake. It's very intrinsic. Performance approach is I want to do a good job. I want other people to see me doing a good job, and it's very extrinsic. And then this performance avoid is I just want to avoid a negative outcome or failing a class. And that orientation is linked with all sorts of bad outcomes. Like you know, when you're trying not to fail, you fail, right? So, but having the learning orientation has the highest outcomes because people aren't worried about the grade or the external praise. They're like, I just want to learn the material, right? Like I need to learn this material because I need to use it. I know whenever I was in graduate school and I was like, I just need to get a grade versus like, oh, this is happening in my internship right now and I need to get good at this. You know, two different worlds on what I was doing there. Okay, so in your handouts, there is this choice map, and this comes from the book, Change Your Questions, Change Your Life, which I've read, and it's a very easy book. It's sort of a story, but it really illustrates how to use learner questions and that how to be more question focused versus judgment focused. And so on this map, you always have a choice. In life, you always have a choice. So when you're on the learner path, you're asking these learner questions. What happened? What do I want? What are the facts? What assumptions am I making? What can I learn? And when you start to go down the judger path, you're starting to say, whose fault is it? Mine, blaming me, blaming somebody else, whatever. Okay, and then the minute you feel yourself judging, you can go to the switching lane, you can start to ask learning questions and get out of there. But if you don't, you're just going to end up in what we call the judger pit. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with them? Why am I such a failure? Why are they so stupid? Why bother? You know, you end up in this, you end up in this, you know, being mired down by judgments. So when you feel yourself going that way, the very cool thing is have some learner questions on hand and you can snap right out of it. So again, one more way to keep out of the negative emotions and to the positive emotions and to a solution. And I think, Meg, your example of that communication, I mean, that's what you're saying. Like, you're like, you know what I mean? Like, you were on the learner path and then like, maybe I have to go down the judger path. No, I'm going to go back to the learner path. So, I mean, I think that was a great example. Okay. And so on the, in your handouts on the back of this sheet are some judger questions and some learner questions. You know, I think what I like is what can we do to turn this around? So there's more here, but just sort of an example. Okay, so reflect back on the problem that you used in the activity you did when you were saying, you know, what was the problem in the last week or so, and really reflect on what type of questions you were asking yourself, and how those questions made you feel. And I want you to share with your partner, and then maybe, and then also think about what kind of learner questions could you have asked to change the situation if you were if you were heading towards a fixed mindset, right? And Meg, I think you gave a great example of doing that, but I want to give everybody else just a minute to think about that. Okay, so I'm going to share one. I love this. Again, talking about that internship situation. Who can I work with to get this project where it should be? That's amazing, right? That shows a real go get them. I want to do it, but like, you know, also this recognition of you need other sources. Anybody else come up with a good learner question? I feel like I just need to write them on my hand. Okay. Well, if not, I'll just, I'll share one way that I've used this. And again, I really think about it with children a lot. But I took my daughter to Ninja Warrior for, we were seeing if she wanted to do her 5th birthday there. And I went in and I thought, oh my God, she tends to have fixed mindset. And I was like, oh no, this is too advanced for her. And I was just kind of silently panicking in my mind. But she seemed to be having a good time. And then they had that warped wall, the wall they run up and jump on an American Ninja Warrior. And she wanted to do it. And you could see in her face, like she was just like, I'm watching people do it. I'm going to do it. This is going to be great. So I was like, okay. So she went and she ran up halfway and she slid down. And she turned around and she just burst into tears. And she came running back to me. And I was like, oh, just so heartbreaking. So just thinking about it, it's so touching anyway. And so I just got down with her and I was like looking in her eyes and I said, look at that person. Do you see them? They didn't make it either. But do you see her? She's continuing to try it. And I said, look at that person. How many times do you think they had to work till they could get to that? And, she's like, it took her like a whole minute to stop crying. But she was like, okay. And so we had this conversation. She calmed down and then she went for it. And she went for it the rest of the hour. She never did another thing. And she never reached it. And she had her birthday party and she never reached it. But like that moment of being able to point out, and I think if I didn't have this material, I just would have been like, oh, it's okay. Don't worry about it. You'll get it one day, and it would have been this very, I wouldn't have gotten what was going on for her. So I thought it was just so, it just such this moment where she was feeling like a failure. And then you could see in her mind too, that she thought she was going to be this, like, when you're 5, like you think you're going to, everything's going to like look beautiful and look like a movie or something. And so anyway, it was just so touching to me. And I thought, what a great example. And this is after like a year of working with her on it, so just like, guys, just always having that ready. And so I think that's also something when you're seeing, a failure type of situation, like being able to go in there with this growth mindset, if it's your client, if you're coaching, this thing that where you come in and you're able to point out a way to change it into growth. So that's my big example. Okay, so your takeaway for today is one, what is the antidote to fixed mind? And it's curiosity, right? It's asking a question. It's also this process praise. So looking at the actions of what people do. And this also translates, I know in the IO world, when we talk about giving feedback, making it about the situation, behavioral, specific, so it's also just practicing a good way of giving feedback, not about a person or innate traits, but about the things that behaviors they're doing. And the last thing is just having these learner questions on hand. So how can you practice this each day for 1 minute? So that's going to be your challenge this week. I'm going to ask you to think about how can you induce some growth mindset into your life every day, right? Think about a primer, an alarm, some habit that you already do. And then you're going to go to the discussion board and write about it. Any questions?
I just have a quick comment.
Yeah.
Going back to the whole person versus process praising. And this is also reference to your story about your daughter, which I thought was really beautiful. It's just so interesting to me how ingrained it is to want to give a person that praise. It immediately I thought, wow, you're an awesome mom, but really what you did was amazing for your daughter. To talk her through her emotions, and to show her that it's not as simple as just running up the hill and hoping that you get up, but to fall a couple times. That's natural, that's normal, it's okay.
Right, yeah. So Jasmine's sharing how it's so ingrained in us to do person praise. It really is, and it's something I've really been working on. And I'm kind of like, I feel a bit bad. Like, did I get her to this point where she's so, fixed on being perfect? So that is like always having that mindset of doing that. And I think the other thing is you start doing it with other people, but also like turning it on yourself. that's like the amazing thing. Like, I think if you can turn it on yourself, it's easy to turn it to show it to others too. Right? And I, just even like another point, like sometimes I would go into a class and I would have great anxiety that the students weren't going to get it. I would feel their anxiety that they weren't going to get it, and I would carry that around versus this more confidence of you're going to get there. We're all going to get there, right? And so, I mean, I would just kind of walk around all semester like, are they going to get it? Which is not a happy way to be walking around versus, I'm confident they will. And even this, like, it's okay. And maybe somebody fails, but they're going to take it again and they'll get it. And just sort of really focusing on a confidence in others, for me, was really helpful. And I'll say one more thing that really changed in me was the way I graded. And one thing I learned is that I was giving very specific details on when they were doing something wrong and not when they were doing something right. So I try to, especially when I'm grading dissertations, to say what they're doing right, so they know to do that again, right? And that's hard to do because it's just easy just to go through and, I just want to tell them the things they need to fix versus the things that they're doing that are really well. So, it's like one word, excellent, versus spelling out why is that excellent? What was the behavior that you did? So that's also something I think that's I'm continually working on. Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay. All right, great. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you so much. And this is going up on the.
Yeah, it's already on there. Yeah, all the PowerPoints are already on Canvas. And then the video will be up there shortly. Okay.
Is everyone going to finish talking?
Yeah, Jessica, the learner questions, the whole packet's online. And I also emailed it to you. So if you look in your email from that, we emailed you the packet and it's in the Canvas shell. Thank you guys. Thank you.